It is July of the year 1636 off the coast of Block Island in the colony of Rhode Island, and the ship is under attack. The colonist crew and captain, John Oldham, are quickly dispatched by Native American attackers. The colonial governments of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut blamed the Narragansett, but the murderers themselves escaped and found refuge amongst the Pequot. Before the time of English contact, the Pequot and Mohegans were one people, but they split into rival groups as the Mohegans became independent. By the 1630s, the Pequot were expanding aggressively into the lands of their neighboring nations as they were competing for shares in the fur trade. The colonists initially had landed in New England to witness the aftermath of horrific epidemics of European diseases, with many towns and villages depopulated. However, they began a tenuous alliance with the Wampanoag leader Massasoit, who made his main village at Mount Hope in modern Bristol, Rhode Island. Meanwhile, the Dutch had been expanding along the Hudson River. Tensions between the colonists and the natives of southwest New England began to rise in the early 1630s. Tensions grew more when Massachusetts Bay Colony became a major producer of wampum, which the Pequot and Narragansett controlled the market for before. Trade relations between the Pequot and Dutch had also broken down into outright war in the early 1630s. In 1634, an Englishman named John Stone was attacked and killed along with several of his ship's crew by the Niantic, a tributary nation to the Pequot. Stone had abducted two Niantic and forced them to act as guides up the Connecticut River, prompting a larger group to attack Stone's ship. Despite this, and general reactions to his death being indifferent, as Stone hadn't had the best reputation, the government of Massachusetts Bay felt it was their duty to seek retribution. Pequot sachem Sassacus sent wampum to the colonists, but refused to send the killers to stand trial. The killing of John Oldham in July of 1636 off the coast of Block Island became the subject of sermons throughout Massachusetts and Plymouth colonies, and in August, Massachusetts Governor Henry Vane sent a party of 90 men, led by John Endicott, to seek revenge on the natives of Block Island. The English attacked two apparently nearly abandoned villages, with 2 men being hurt. While the colonists claimed to kill 14, later Narragansett reports only list 1 casualty. Endicott then attacked a Pequot village in Connecticut, demanding Stone and Oldham's killers, but the village was abandoned, so they burned it. In the aftermath of Endicott's expedition, the Pequot rallied their allies, but only convinced the western Niantic to join them. The Mohegans, Narragansett, and Wampanoag allied with the colonists. The Pequot laid siege to Fort Saybrook in modern Connecticut and started attacking towns throughout the region. While the siege lifted in spring of 1637, attacks on towns ramped up. In May, many Connecticut leaders met in Hartford to raise a militia of 90 Englishmen, led by Captain John Mason, and 70 Mohegans, led by their sachem, Uncas. The militia traveled to Fort Saybrook, where 20 more men, led by John Underhill, joined them. Then they were joined by 200 Narragansett. The group then marched near the mouth of the Mystic River to lead a surprise attack on one of the Pequot's main fortified villages. In the pre-dawn hours of May 26, 1637, the colonial forces, along with their Mohegan and Narragansett allies, attacked the Pequot town. 20 soldiers managed to break through the palisade, but were quickly overwhelmed, setting fire to the town to escape. Following this, the village began to burn, and any who escaped were killed by the soldiers outside. Captain Mason called the attack an act of God. Of the 500 Pequot in the town, only 14 survived, 7 of which were taken prisoner. The Narragansetts and Mohegans were horrified by the actions of the English. The Narragansett even attempted to leave, but rejoined the force upon figuring out the Pequot were setting up ambushes. The trek back saw skirmish after bloody skirmish, as the Pequot kept attacking, but the colonist force escaped Pequot territory. Following the Mystic Massacre, the spirit of the Pequot were broken. Sassacus led 400 in a trek west to seek refuge with the Mohawk. However, Mason and Uncas caught up with Sassacus at a Metabesic village near modern Fairfield, Connecticut on July 13th. The English allowed 180 elderly men, women, and children to surrender. The 200 Matabesic were also allowed to leave. Around 100 warriors stayed with Sassacus. The fighting continued into the night. The Pequot held their position, however, until a fog rolled in the following morning. Sassacus was able to break through a weak point in the English line and continue his escape to the Mohawk. Those who surrendered were sold into slavery. Sassacus finally made it to the Mohawk with his remaining followers, only to be killed along with his surviving men. The head and hands of Sassacus were sent to Hartford. Only 200 Pequot survived, and they did so by joining the Narragansett and Mohegans. The Treaty of Hartford was signed by the colonists, Mohegans, and Narragansett on September 21st, 1638. The colonies prohibited any surviving Pequot from calling themselves so. The Pequot War was the first time the New England Algonquin witnessed the tactics of European warfare, but it wouldn't be the last. While a tense peace between the colonists and natives would last nearly 40 years, this peace will be broken by an extremely consequential war in the 1670s. This war would be King Philip's War. Thanks for watching.